feel like the marriage course gave us the tools to have that good marriage.
It definitely gave me the tools to communicate, because I'm not very good at that, and also gave me the ability to kind of learn to listen.
We treat each other with respect whenever, wherever, and it just taught us that. I think to myself, there's times when people have children and they say, I wish it would have come with an instruction manual. And boy, wouldn't that be nice to have that with a marriage too. And I think that this class honestly can give you that instruction manual.
And the people that teach the course are just absolutely amazing individuals, and they deserve a pat on their back.
They do.
And the food's good too. Food's good.
Our first class, we left and we got in the car, and my husband looks at me and he says, I want to have a marriage like they have. I think there's always a time when you can always learn something. And I think if you're married a month or you've been married 15 years or 30 years, it gives you those tools. And it reminds you of things like date nights and how important it is to cherish one another and take that time for each other. I've mentioned the marriage course to a lot of couples, and they get nervous. And it's more of, I looked forward to it because every Friday night I got to sit at the table with my husband with a little candle in front of us, and we had a wonderful meal, and we didn't have to fix the kids' plates, get them sit down, the water, the milk, everything else. It was alone time for us to learn and to teach each other and to communicate. I don't want people to be scared that it's some big marriage course where everybody's involved in your marriage, because it's not at all. You know, people always make their New Year's resolution to either lose weight or quit smoking, but I think more importantly is your marriage. Just going to this course, it just totally turned. And I think a lot of it was because we put God in our lives. It has totally changed our home life, our married life, and our personal lives.
Good evening. How you guys doing? Thanks. Don't make this hard. It's really weird walking up on the stage again. Danny Tavori, little story. When he was in middle school, interacting with him, where's he at? There he is. Interacting with this guy, having conversations with him, and I couldn't stand him. And here's why. I thought, this kid is hopeless. There is no way he's going to make it anywhere. The last time he and I talked, I actually shared it with him, so it's okay, okay? It's okay that we're having this conversation in front of all these people. And I absolutely love watching him stand right here leading us. Boy, am I wrong. Did you guys have a good Christmas? Yeah, so my wife and I, we live in Gunnison, for those of you who don't know. And we're like, cool, we get to go to Grand Junction and speak and warm up. It was 16 below at our house this morning. At 11:30, the sun was shining, and it was 2 below. And we thought, it's going to be nice and warm, so we brought, shorts and light jackets. And it's cold here. What happened, Grand Junction? Oh, ow. What does that mean? Oh, no. It says it brought it with him. So I got to tell you a story about Christmas, because it has something to do with what I'm talking about today. I remember when I was a little kid, for Santa, instead of leaving milk and cookies, it was the tradition at our house to leave a 6-pack of beer and a summer sausage. Now, as a kid, I never thought anything about that. You know, I went to school, and you could ask me, what do you guys leave for Santa? Beer. Doesn't everybody? Yeah, you ever see how a sleigh rides after that? My dad would always say, Santa gets tired of milk and cookies. So, cool, that was how life was. Now, why I'm telling you that is because if, as a kid, I was actually fully aware of what was going on, I would have been really disappointed. If I would have been aware that we were leaving beer and sausage because my dad was an alcoholic, I would have been disappointed. And then I would have also found out that there's kids in here, cover your ears, certain characters of Christmas that did not exist. I would have been disappointed, right? And I think about that, and I think about Christmas, and I go, you know, one of the things that is so interesting about Christmas is there's a lot of disappointment that also comes with Christmas. Honestly, how many of you saw the look of disappointment on your kids' face this year? Stick your hand up. Nobody. Okay, good. Well, here, I'll vouch for you. How many of you remember opening a pack of socks? Oh, yeah, disappointment memories. They're coming back. I remember you're all excited and your friend gets some cool video game or something and you open up socks. You know what's funny is now I would love to get a pack of socks. I'm like, yes, there's holes in my socks. How many of you have seen the look of disappointment on your spouse? You're all excited about what you got. Yeah, good. Yeah, yeah. Okay, see, there you go. Disappointment comes with Christmas. I remember, and I can share this now because my grandmother has passed away, but I can remember 2 Christmases when I was in first grade, 2 different times, I'm going to say the word 2 all night, shirts that she bought me. And I remember opening these shirts and being horrified because I knew if I wore that in public, everyone would beat me up. Do you remember getting that sweater, that shirt, that thing? Giant bunny pajamas when you're a boy? You know what's really bad is I think it takes a lot for a first grade boy to be nervous about his clothes. When does a first grade boy care about what he wears? As long as there's holes and dirt on it, it's cool, right? So the idea here is, you guys, is our world offers a lot of disappointment. We could go around the room and share stories about the disappointment that the world has offered us in our lives individually. And one of the things that happens is we find ourselves taking that attitude and becoming disappointed in God. And here's why. The world measures success by tangible, rateable accomplishments. And it becomes really easy for us to take that same thing and put it on God. Examples. He didn't show up the way we wanted him to. His answer to our prayer was not what we were looking for. He didn't answer our prayer. Maybe he didn't do it fast enough. Bing, bing. Maybe it's the fact that he seems distant. Maybe something went wrong in life, something went bad, and all of a sudden what happens is we find a little bit of anger, a little bit of resentment, a little bit of blame, a little bit of disappointment being projected towards God. And when that happens, we take matters into our own hands. He didn't do what I wanted him to, so I'm going to do it myself. Now, when Sarah and I moved to Gunnison has been labeled a double-income town. Everything's expensive up there. Why? Nobody lives there. So maybe that's why they need the income. $50 for M&Ms. So we go to Gunnison. It's a double-income town, and Sarah and I have always had this conviction that while our kids were young, whether we were strapped or not financially, it was important for her to at least be home so we could raise our kids with our values. That was important to us. And we get up there, and we find that things are getting kind of tight, and Sarah has a teaching degree, so she gets a job part-time, like 8 hours a week at this really cool daycare. And all of a sudden, we find that we're more stressed out. Things are getting worse. We're actually making less money. Figure that one out. Income is worse. And it was because we took this thing that God had put in our hearts and put it into our own hands. We said, we'll do it. It's not working out the way we want to do it, so we'll do it ourselves. There's an old proverb. Some of you have probably had your parents tell you this. You need to wake up and smell what you're shoveling. You guys ever hear that? You ever heard your parents tell you that? That's good. Well, that's an old proverb. What happens is we find ourselves getting into this routine or this thing in life where we've taken things into our own control and we're shoveling a mess. And sometimes us taking control of a situation looks like a lifestyle that we choose and pursue, a habit that helps us cope with our disappointment and how God's not doing what we want him to do. Maybe it's a heart condition, and boy, how many people do I know that their resolution to a situation is a grudge, a hard spot right there. And they can just run on that forever. Maybe it's this reckless pursuit of self-promotion or recognition. Psalm 116, it's going to come up on the screen here. It says, the Lord is gracious and righteous. Our God is full of compassion. The Lord protects the simple-hearted. When I was in great need, he saved me. And I love this next part. Be at rest once more, O my soul, for the Lord has been good to you. And it's like, be at rest once more. It's like, they don't know who wrote this psalm, unknown author. It's like he's got to remind himself daily, or herself, be at rest. God is good. And it's like this reminder that we need, because sometimes we just get in this rut of disappointment. God is good. So often what happens is we look for God in these huge, powerful, outrageous, enormous ways, that what happens is we miss God in the little things. We miss him in the small things. And I got to say this, and this is really what I'm talking about tonight. If it's small, but the very fact that God is doing it, that makes it epic. The smallest thing in the world that God is doing in your life is absolutely epic because God is doing it. Maybe it's the simple thing that God is doing in your marriage. And I could even say this, the fact that you are still married is epic because there is a war on the institution of marriage today. If you're still married, that's huge. Recognize God in that. Maybe it's the little conversations that God is opening up at work or with your friends or your neighbors. Maybe it's the way your kids want to hang out with you. It's this little thing that you never really think about, but God's in that. Maybe it's how you feel like God is telling you to slow down. Or maybe you're hearing the words from God, not yet. And it doesn't feel very epic, but it's coming from God, and so I'm going to tell you that that's epic. Maybe it's the person that really annoys you, but God has put that person in your life, and you can't figure out why. That's epic. Maybe a door or an opportunity closed in your life that you were really counting on, but it feels like God was in it, and you're not sure what to do with it. Well, I'll tell you right now, it's epic, and there's something that God's doing there. We have to remember that no matter how much we want God in the earthquake, a lot of times he's in the whisper. And I know I'm so bad about this that, I have things that I pray about every day. Certain things, And then some days I pray for new stuff. And one of the things, this is interesting, that I find myself praying is, God, when you answer a prayer, would you help me recognize it? Because I'll pray for stuff and go on through my life completely forgetting about the things I've prayed about and forgetting about the fact that God is even working and orchestrating things in my life. And so I'll be going through my day, and all of a sudden I'll have this realization like, that was an answer to prayer. Wow, thanks, God. I needed that. Driving down the road, bing! God was just doing something, and I normally miss it. So I'm going to read Luke 24 through 26 to you. Sorry, I haven't spoke. I've spoke 4 times, 5 times in a church since going from 5 times a week to I'm in sermon apathy. So, atrophy. See? Who? What? Apples? What's going on is this is 3 days after Jesus was crucified and had risen again. And we're going to start off in verse 13. It says, now that same day, 2 of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were talking with each other about everything that had happened. As they talked and discussed these things with each other, Jesus himself came up and walked along with them. But they were kept from recognizing him. He asked them, what are you discussing together as you walk along? They stood still, their faces downcast. One of them, named Cleopas, asked him, are you only a visitor to Jerusalem and do not know the things that have happened there in these days? What things? He asked. About Jesus of Nazareth, they replied. He was a prophet, powerful in word and deed before God and all the people. The chief priests and our rulers handed him over to be sentenced to death, and they crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one who was going to redeem Israel. And what is more, it is the 3rd day since all this took place. In addition, some of our women amazed us. They went to the tomb early this morning, but didn't find his body. They came and told us that they had seen a vision of angels who said he was alive. Then some of our companions went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but they did not see him. He said to them, "How foolish you are and how slow of heart to believe all the prophets have spoken. Did not the Christ have to suffer these things and then enter his glory?" And so I want to talk about this because here's these two guys that are walking and talking with Jesus and didn't even realize that God was in their presence. And so we're going to talk about this. How can we connect with God in the small things? How can we identify and experience God in the simple things in our life? And the first one is this. If you want to write it down, you can. And this is a hard one for me because it's not my character. Slow down, take a breath, and let go of your control. You know, the illusion of control is wonderful. But no matter how much we want to be in control, we're not. We're not. It just feels good to tell ourselves that we are. It feels good to think that we're controlling things. We're not. One of the things I've been loving is framing houses when it's bitter cold and pastoring at the same time. I guess what I'm saying is this, not being on a payroll and pastoring. And I know it's just for a season, however that looks, but I'm loving it. And the reason why was because I remember pastoring at first out of this passion, and this thing that God had just put in my heart, and I couldn't deny it. And it was, I had to tell somebody about God. And then I started getting a paycheck. And then you're doing the same thing every single week, and week after week, and then year after year, and year after the same. And a lot of times it becomes a job instead of a passion that God had put in you. A lot of things, you know, it becomes about, well, I need to change what I'm doing because, you know, my income and it's kind of my livelihood. And you know what I've really been loving? And I even said this at the last church. I was talking about this little church that we're going to. I say little, it's like 300 people. It's little. After coming from here. I'm talking about tithing, right? And it was the coolest thing for me to stand there and go, I could care less if you tithe or not. I could care less. It makes no difference to me. Why? Because it's between you and God. But I could care less. And I've got the pastor sitting there going, but you know why I was able to say that? Because I wasn't on the payroll. It didn't affect my life one way or the other. I'm probably going to get a nasty letter from Kirk now. Or a phone call. I would find that I would not honestly speak out of my heart with what I knew what God had really put in there out of fear of offending somebody. I don't want to ruffle some feathers. I'm not going to say everything that God put in my heart. You know what I mean? A lot of it became a job, and so I love doing it, even if it's for a season, not being on a payroll. It's cool. Look at verse 13 through 16. It says, now that same day, two of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were talking with each other about everything that had happened. As they talked and discussed these things with each other, Jesus himself came up and walked along with them. But they were kept from recognizing him. Now, the Bible and theologians don't say that this was like some spell that Jesus cast on them so they couldn't see him. Like Jedi mind trick. You don't see me. It wasn't, I think they were kept from seeing him because they were in such a blur of what was going on. Here's two guys walking, talking, thinking about God, and so hasty to get where they're going to this town Emmaus that they were totally missing Jesus right in front of them. And I think there are so many times where you and me can get so busy and so that we miss Jesus right here in these little things. I know when I was here on staff, 9 years, by the way, Tabori. You were 8, 10. You were just like all around. 30. You got a good memory. I lost my train of thought. I was doing 2 different sermons a week, you know, on average, and then all the other things, and you just got really busy and tired sometimes, doing good things, and, you know, doing God stuff. And I'd find myself getting weary, and in my quiet times, I'd find myself gleaning stuff out of my quiet time, which was supposed to be between me and God, gleaning stuff for my sermons. What can I get for them when I can't even get it for myself? And that's kind of dangerous. Even doing good doesn't necessarily make it right. So slow down. Take in your relationship with Jesus Christ again. Slow down. Take a pulse on that thing. Take in your family. You want to experience God in epic ways? Take in your family. Take in the people that God's put around you. You know, sometimes you don't realize what you had till you are gone. And I can stand right here and I can look at so many faces and it breaks my heart because of relationship that you have with people. And then it's gone. And it hurts. Take in the people that God's put around you. You're going to connect with God in these epically simple ways. Here's the second thing. Don't be afraid to make mistakes pursuing God's epic tale for your life. Like 3 years ago, Sarah and I, we bought an ice cream maker, and we're like, let's make homemade ice cream. So we got this recipe off the internet for a strawberry custard. Whoo! It was good. It was like, that was good. Good. This is the best ice cream I have ever had, and I'm not lying. It was so good that one night I'm having a dream about how good it was. I'm sitting there, and in my dream, I've got this cone, and it's this big wad of strawberry custard, and I am just like, sloppy, and I can taste it. I can feel the ice cream running down my throat, and it was a good dream. It was so good that I woke up, and I'm lying there on my back with my mouth completely open, and my dog is standing over me, licking out my mouth. Who knows how long I was dreaming about that ice cream? My dog knows. I felt violated. How long have you been standing over me, making out with me So, it was good ice cream. Now, that mistake was almost worth it because it reminded me of how good the real thing really is. And I'm not talking about kisses. It reminded me of how good that ice cream was. It was this ridiculous mistake, but it was almost worth it. You look at verse 17 and 18. Jesus says, he asked them, "What are you discussing together as you walk along?" Like he didn't know. They stood still, their faces downcast. One of them, named Cleopas, asked him, "Are you only a visitor to Jerusalem and do not know these things that have happened there in these days?" And here's what Jesus had told him. He told him, "Stay in Jerusalem. One is coming after me who is greater than I." Jesus told him that he was going to have to die and that in 3 days he was going to be raised again. Jesus told him that he was going to rebuild the temple in 3 days. And what? In less than 3 days, on the third day, when something big is supposed to be happening, these guys are already walking. They're already on their way out of Jerusalem. It's been 3 days almost. Let's split. Downcast and depressed. Not willing to just stick around a little bit longer and see what was going to happen. Were they afraid they were going to look stupid if Jesus didn't come through? I think a lot of us have had that feeling. Were they feeling like Jesus pulled a fast one on them? Or maybe they weren't willing to take the heat in case something came against the believers? But instead of digging in and standing their ground and maybe making a possible chance of making a mistake and holding tight and saying, you know what, I'm going to believe this Jesus guy for just a minute and see what happens and dig in. Instead of doing that, they were walking in less than 3 days. So if you want to be encountered by God in incredible, simple ways, take a little risk, a little one, tiny, teeny. Talk to somebody. Start a conversation. Have faith for something for longer than 3 days. God's not showing up, man. It's been 3 hours. Come on. Dig in a little bit. Maybe fear the idea of making a mistake. Try something new. Get out of your routine in ministry or in life. Get out of your routine. You know what a routine is? I'm learning this for myself. A routine is our attempt to be in control of a situation. Because we're in control. Okay, here you go. Next one. Remember the stuff that God has put in your heart. We were here, Sarah and I, the weekend after Thanksgiving, and I loved it because we're watching the video up on the screen, and it's the video of you guys celebrating all the 900 bazillion Thanksgiving dinners that you gave away as a church to the people who needed it in the community. And so God put this thing on your heart, and then you turn around and you did it, and then you remembered it, and you celebrated, and you said, look what we did as a church. And I remember sitting there going, that's awesome. That is cool. And then a little while ago, I was here one day, and I'm hanging out with the youth department, and we're talking, and for some reason, we got on the subject of taking God moments for granted. These little things that you see God doing and kind of getting used to it or taking it for granted. And I wasn't even thinking about this, but it just popped into my head. I remember looking at Malachi and going, Mal, do you remember when we used to baptize like 20-something kids in some cold high mountain pond at a camp? You just baptized a trainload of teenagers. And every time it was like incredible and it was awesome. You were numb because you were in the water for so long. But as I'm talking about this, I started to cry a little bit. And this thought popped into my head, I haven't seen someone baptized in a year. I have not seen someone baptized in a year. And for me, that's a big deal. And it's been huge for me to remember the things that God had put in my heart and the things that I got used to seeing. I got used to God working in my life. Got used to the little God moments, big God moments. Taking it for granted. I know a lot of the things that God's planted in my heart. I'm almost done. You guys doing okay? Okay. I haven't done this for a while. I'm venting right now, okay? Kirk asked me, he's like, hey, are you doing okay, man? Like, you need anything? And I was like, it's kind of weird being a pastor that speaks a lot and then not speak a lot because you got all this junk that's like, you're like, I got to tell somebody. And so, writing it on a journal just doesn't do it. So I'm venting. But I got all these things that like God's put in my heart for me, things that won't go away. Things you got to do. And a lot of times I'll find myself doing the opposite. You guys ever notice that? God puts something in your heart and you do the opposite. In verse 19, what things, he asked, about Jesus of Nazareth? They replied, he was a prophet, powerful in word and deed before God and all the people. The chief priests and our rulers handed him over to be sentenced to death, and they crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one who was going to redeem Israel. And what is more, it is the third day since all this took place. So they're remembering all the things that they knew Jesus was. He was this incredible person, did miracles, did this, said on the third day this was going to happen. And they were already forgetting what Jesus had put in their hearts. They were already just kind of like forgot. They just kind of dropped it. Now, maybe it's easier to walk away from God's purposes. I think it is sometimes. But I also know this. It doesn't profit the world anything. It doesn't profit the kingdom of God anything. And it doesn't profit you or I anything. Nothing. These two guys had already forgotten the things Jesus had put in their hearts. Proverbs 19:21 says, many are the plans in a man's heart, but it is the Lord's purpose that prevails. I can take you back. I was 8 years old, back at the old Vineyard. The old Vineyard. It had a beard. It was white. On North Avenue. Man, I've been out of Junction so long, I don't even remember the name of the streets here. On North Avenue, and we go to this Sunday night service, and the guy who's speaking is a guy who was prophetic and tended to have prophetic words for people. And at the end of the service, he's standing there and he's pointing people out, and he's like, stand up, and he would say a word over them. And I was like, I wasn't like totally into God. I was just, like I believed, I think. And I remember standing there, and he looks at me and my brothers and sisters, all four of us, and he says, you stand up. Everyone's looking at you.